Please welcome Bill Faloon.
Thank you for those kind words. Wow, look at all these people. It's incredible. Make sure my mic is working. I was just giving you guys some compliments. I want to open this talk by enlightening the group that since last year's RAADfest, that was October 2021, since last year's RAADfest, there have been more initiatives and advances in the fields of age delay and age reversal than any other 12-month period of time. That is what a lot of people don't realize because they're paying attention to the news, the politics, the plague, the war, and they're not focusing on what's really important. I'm going to let you know over the next hour what we're doing. Now, for some of you with underlying health issues, I'm going to make some suggestions as it relates to medications, diet, and if you choose to not follow my suggestions, my fear is you may not achieve the longevity objectives, super longevity objectives that you came for this conference to learn about. And I'm going to be talking about some tragedies, not just the good stuff. I want people to know that RAADfest attendees sometimes have bad habits. If they don't break your bad habits, unfortunately, we can't do much about that. So, some good news. 1980, in the United States, there were about 32,000 people aged 100 and above. And then 40 years later, that number almost triples. But what's really amazing is the projection. And this is based on incremental improvements in preventative and alternative and conventional medicine. Just incremental improvements, 600,000 projected Americans alive 2060 after age 100. And these people making the projections have no idea what you're going to learn this weekend at RAADfest. So this is what people need to understand. We are making these advancements, not getting the media coverage we like. But to put this in further perspective, there's been a huge decline in age-adjusted death rates. And that means that fewer people per 100,000 are dying. That blue line shows since 1900 a decline in the number of Americans who drop dead. And that's a huge improvement. And that shows that the science is working because of the age-adjusted death rate. That reflects the reality. And where is that occurring? Not in babies anymore or middle-aged people. Since 1990, most of the improvements in mortality, and that improvement in mortality means fewer deaths, is occurring in people 65 years of age and older. And that applies to most of us in this room. I'm going to be turning 68 very soon. And I appreciate the fact that the technology is evolving in a way that's enabling people my age to live longer. But going back to 1980, there's been a 187% increase in the number of people over age 64. And that may not sound like an old age to you, 64, but it used to be. Used to be 64-year-old people had multiple morbidities, and they didn't live very much long past that age. But there's been huge, huge improvements that enabled them to live longer. And for those who don't know, I am a licensed Florida funeral director and embalmer. I practiced in the 1970s and 1980s. I put a lot of people in the ground, a lot of people in the crematory, but I'd always ask the family members, well, what caused that person to die at such a young age? No matter what the age was, it was too young, in my opinion. And in almost every situation, they knew the bad habits that person engaged in. They understood what was going on. I'd interact with a doctor and get the death certificate signed. But the bottom line is, people were dying in the 1970s, 1980s in almost every non-traumatic death. They would have not died at that time with technologies that exist today. With today's technology. Yeah, 1980, you had a stroke, a thrombotic stroke. They didn't have ways to reverse that. You just laid there and lost your mobility, you lost your ability to feel, your vision, and you died. And now we have ways of circumventing that. And where you live has a lot to do with how long you're going to live. The darker states are where people live longer. The white states is where people die sooner. And, well, you look at Hawaii, those people get to live on average a little bit over 80 years. In Mississippi, you're lucky to make it to 72. But you look at the lifestyles of people living in Hawaii compared to Mississippi, and it's really easy to understand why there's that huge gap in life expectancy. The media continues to give us really favorable coverage. Leading scientists are talking about aging being delayed, stopped, and reversed. It's making it into the mainstream media, and it's easy to overlook, but I don't overlook it. I make a PowerPoint slide just to show the group what's been happening. And of course, that $3 billion pledge that's turned into reality, because top scientists have been hired to find a way to keep us alive a real long time, if not forever. That's the objectives of people like Jeff Bezos, Peter Thiel, and many other wealthy people. They're seeing the reality come through. And that again made some media coverage in January, February 2022, but not nearly the coverage it should have. Now, a lot of you have been attending RAADfest since 2016, and the cover of New Scientist had an article about age reversal technologies. And what's interesting is, in that article is everything you learned about at previous RAADfest. It's in that magazine, and I love it. They're basically validating what we postulated back in 2016, 2018, and it's fantastic news. GDF11, you heard Steve Perry introduce that at RAADfest in 2016. And he gave a fantastic presentation on it. He'll be on this stage this weekend talking about GDF11, and the New York Times gave it some media coverage, some favorable coverage. We're seeing this occur. And the Saudi royal family, MIT confirmed, they're committing $1 billion a year. $1 billion a year to find a way to enable people to live a lot longer. And it's critical that you have that kind of money being funded year after year. You just can't do it with one shot. That's not the way to do it. And hey, for the first time, 100% of the human genome sequenced. That's in 2022. Some people thought it occurred in 2003, only 92%. 100% fully sequenced in 2022. And what does that mean for us? Well, we can utilize that information to potentially emulate the immortal jellyfish. And their genome was also sequenced in 2022. So information from the genome of the immortal jellyfish may be transferable into humans using CRISPR gene therapy. CRISPR may be our salvation. But before we get there, we need to identify what can we do in the meantime. Now, they're doing research using CRISPR to enhance immune function, to kill more tumor cells, to combat immune senescence. This is spectacular news, and it keeps coming. Every couple of days, I'm getting these kind of reports about research going on. And what's interesting is how quickly research is being transitioned from animals to people. In May of 2021, they gave a CRISPR gene edit, simple single gene edit, to this monkey, and cholesterol went down by 60%. And that transitioned into a human study just about 13, 14 months later. And if that therapy works, you'll be able to lower your lipid levels and not take a statin drug or any of the other expensive drugs out there. This will enable a lot of people to avoid cardiovascular disease with a single gene edit. So last year, I talked about a front page article in the Wall Street Journal and plenty of other publications about a group of age-accelerated mice. These are progeroid mice that more than doubled their lifespan with a very simple CRISPR gene edit. And I showed this still photo of an unedited mouse on the left, and it's old and decrepit, like old and decrepit people. But the CRISPR-edited mice, they were running around the cage at 11 months looking really healthy. And what I didn't know is that there were videos made of this study and some really nice narratives. So what I'm going to show you now is an untreated mouse, a progeroid mouse at 7.5 months, and that's about as long as they lived. Most of the other ones were dead by this point, but they are not in very good shape, and neither are most people aged 100 right now. So listen to what the description of this situation is.
Let me see everybody. Say hi. And usually at their endpoints, this is what they are usually like. They don't want to move around too much. They either have very shallow, low breathing, or they have very rapid breathing. He's very attenuated and very not feeling very well.
So we then move forward to CRISPR-edited age-accelerated mice. Now here we are over 2 months, and in mouse lifespan, that's a lot of time. And let's see how they're faring with their edited genes.
And then over here, we have the males with the same thing. So the females and the males are maintaining their weights between 22 and 24 grams currently. All animals are 9.75 plus or minus a week, around that area, months old. So they are far surpassed from what they usually age out to. And their phenotype is, as you can see, they have a nice sleek coat. Just like this is a C57 and this is the homozygous female. So they're very similar in comparison at this point. From the last video you saw that was sent, 7.5-month-old homozygous animal, they should be in very deteriorated health, but they are not, which is...
So we move forward to the 11-month-old mice and see how they're doing. Remember, the unedited mice, they're all dead. But these ones, well, let's see how they're faring.
And then we have, as compared to the C57, they still have a very nice sleek coat. They're still very, very active. If I were to pick them up, they can jump out of my hand, quite literally.
It's really remarkable what they're able to do in the laboratory. So what we did is we put them side by side. You see the 7.5-month-old unedited mouse on the verge of death, and then you see the older mice running around a cage, having sex, playing around, having a good time. Big difference by having the CRISPR gene edit done. And this was for males and females. They had the same benefit. If their genes were edited, they didn't age the same way as these other age-accelerated mice models. So we have it right before our eyes, the benefits of CRISPR gene editing, and it's hard to doubt that it's going to work. But how are we going to live long enough to personally benefit from those kind of changes? We feel they're going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, if not sooner. Well, transcription factors, they control our gene expression. And if we modulate our gene expression the proper way, we can live a real long time. So it's almost like a light switch, off and on. If you activate transcription factors that are beneficial to the cell, that turn on good beneficial processes, and then suppress the aging-associated transcription factors, you can enable cells to be reprogrammed, to go back in time to an embryonic state. And we're very motivated by this. Nobel Prize won in 2012 for discovering the Yamanaka transcription factors. You've heard that before a lot, but it's improving. They're seeing results that are unreal. Now, what we did a couple years ago was commissioned a study of all of the transcription factor studies to put it into one review article, get it published in a respected journal, and encourage other people to start pursuing this research. And guess what? March 2002, it happened. Salk Institute released data that was just unreal, hasn't ever been released before, partial age reversal in live mice. It's no longer the test tube, no longer all the different models that we use to try to show aging going in reverse. They were able to reverse aging in live mice. It made some headlines. Some media attention to it was given, but not nearly enough. And the Salk scientists were able to literally reverse the aging process in middle-aged and elderly mice. They were able to restore them to a more youthful state. And again, cell reprogramming. OSKM, the acronym for Yamanaka factors, and the longer they administered the Yamanaka factors, the greater the benefits. And very important, no toxicity or cancer risk increases whatsoever. So that's very important. A lot of people are concerned about that. That study did not show a problem. And guess what? Their skin looked younger. Younger looking skin. Skin cells dividing more rapidly, lower inflammation, reduced senescent cell markers in their body. This is fantastic. Unfortunately, data on lifespan was not collected, and this is the problem when scientists don't have all the money they need. They do partial experiments, and then they have to stop. Well, this got enough publicity that on the Tonight Show, Jimmy Fallon made a joke about it. Let's see what he has to say.
And finally, this is amazing. There's a new therapy that could actually reverse the aging process by making your cells young again. Yeah, it's crazy. Soon people might be able to go back to how they looked years ago.
Now, I'm not sure what the joke is, because I think everyone in here would like to go back how they looked maybe at 21 or 25. But nonetheless, this science emerged in 2022. This emerged over the last 12 months. Inside and outside, age reversal occurring in these animal models. And then just a month after that Salk Institute study, human aged skin cells reversed by 30 years. So people worried about the aging effect on their outer appearance? Well, they might start looking younger again very soon. You can imagine the companies are going to try to commercialize on this type of technology. So just a brief chronology of the history of this. 2006, for the first time ever, they were able to reprogram an old cell back into a youthful state. 2011, they took a 100-year-old human cell and they were able to reprogram that cell back into a youthful state in the Petri dish, in vitro. Well, look where we are in 2022. 100% of the human genome sequenced, aging partially reversed in live mice. Wow. And there's research underway this year, going on right now, to use that same technology to rejuvenate elderly people. And I wish I had results to report, but science does not move at the pace of the RAADfest schedule. So this will be coming to you in updates, emails that we send out. So what we're doing, helping to fund right now, is a study with very old people who are volunteering to essentially try to emulate what was done in those mice at the Salk Institute, reverse aging in people. So the strategy is to remove old cells from circulating blood. These are peripheral blood mononuclear cells, and then put them into a Petri dish, have them multiply, and apply Yamanaka and other transcription factors to those old cells obtained from circulating blood. And bear in mind, these are autologous cells, meaning their DNA will be the same DNA as the person they put it back into, because they're going to reinfuse huge numbers of reprogrammed autologous stem cells, put it back into the circulation to see if we cannot systemically rejuvenate a person the way you saw with those mice, the way the Salk Institute succeeded. This is a group that we fund, Better Humans nonprofit charity, and they're spending right now, thank goodness for donors, about $100,000 a month to keep us alive. These scientists work around the clock. They've got elaborate equipment. This is the group of them. You have James Clement in the background and his 4 scientists. These people are trying to find a way to reverse aging in time to save everyone's life in this room. They've got probably well over $1 million worth of equipment, including a mass spec. It costs over $500,000. They have been getting some nice donations. But this is one of those charities, if you write checks to different charities every year, this one really should be on your list. And what they're doing in Texas is they're building a 28,000 square foot age reversal vivarium to study aging in animals, to be able to reverse it, and do a lot more in the field of diagnostics to validate whether we're really reversing aging in people. That's going to be done in the next 6 months, and they're going to expand their program dramatically. Senolytics, I could have done a whole presentation on those this year. There's that much to go on, but what I want to do is just remind people what senescent cells are. They accumulate with aging, they emit toxic inflammatory factors, they emit protein-degrading enzymes, they shorten our healthy lifespan. We need to get these senescent cells out of our aging bodies, and that's what senolytics do. They remove selectively senescent cells, leaving our healthy cells virtually untouched. And what we did to make it simple is, this is data from the National Library of Medicine. 2013, there was nothing about senolytics. They didn't know a thing about how to remove senescent cells. They knew there was a problem, they just didn't know what to do about it. And you can see this chart, the number of published studies skyrocketing over a relatively brief period of time. This is what technology is enabling us to do right now, remove senescent cells. Now, some of you are experimenting with a drug called dasatinib, and this is the current experimental protocol that we are recommending at the moment. That doesn't mean it's the ideal one, but the idea is dasatinib on day 1, theaflavin, quercetin, fisetin. That's a nice senolytic cocktail. And if you don't have any side effects on day 1, repeat it on day 2, and do that 1 time a month, just once a month. But a little caveat, if you are taking rapamycin right now, just don't take rapamycin that 1 week you're taking the senolytic, because the rapamycin might protect those senolytic cells from the destruction you're trying to induce with the senolytic dose protocol. And the good news may be a vaccine could be available relatively soon that would enable our own immune system and other methods to literally take care of our senescent cell burden the way it does with younger people. Young people naturally naturally remove senescent cells. We have a defective immune system with aging, and it doesn't do it. David Sinclair gave it a nice thumbs up as it relates to something that's viable in our lifetime. Books have come out this year on aging, reporting essentially on everything you've learned at RAADfest, and they're getting nice endorsements by people like Sanjay Gupta saying really nice things about what we're doing. So what are we going to do to stay alive long enough to benefit from CRISPR, transcription factors, and many, many others? Well, stop eating all the time. Consider on most days just not eating anything for about 16 hours, black coffee, green tea, no problem. But don't eat all the time, and confine your eating to around an 8-hour window. Now, the New England Journal of Medicine published a study in 2019 about all these improvements, and then since last year's RAADfest, more and more studies came out, the bulk of them showing significant benefits when you don't put food in your body all the time. This is a way to add potentially many years to your healthy lifespan by not eating all the time. Now, last year we showed this slide, one of many we showed last year about intermittent fasting, and it talked about reducing cancer risk by turning down tumor promoters. It's a really fantastic study. And what happened this year? Wow, they were able to test on cancer patients a fasting mimicking diet, and they were able to show tumor promoters like insulin, IGF-1, glucose. They were able to show significant reductions by people who did some relatively nominal fasting. And then this year alone, they did a study with advanced cancer patients, and 5 of them, 5 out of 101, they were able to enjoy a complete response, a durable complete response. So if you have cancer, adding intermittent fasting to your conventional program might make you one of those fortunate people who are doing very well, and they're alive when they shouldn't be. Now, the media, again, giving us lots and lots of coverage. I showed this last year, prevention, and then I was at the checkout counter at Whole Foods, and I see a whole magazine on intermittent fasting. This was unheard of 4 or 5 years ago, and now it's making it to the mainstream. But they talk about living longer, reducing inflammation, losing some weight. We're seeing it occur before our eyes. Rapamycin, a lot of people are taking that right now as a way to potentially increase their lifespan, and the reason they're doing that is, well, a study came out in 2019 to validate many, many other studies. But this showed that you can start rapamycin in middle-aged or older age and still potentially extend your lifespan in a major way. There's not much we can do when we get older to extend life by this percentage. And a new mechanism of rapamycin has been discovered. This deals with protein synthesis. When we get older, our cells don't synthesize proteins very effectively. There's error rates. It turns out rapamycin reduces the error rate that occurs in our aging cells in response to just normal phenomena. Rapamycin then enables healthier proteins to be produced in our aging cells, and in doing so, it's another mechanism by which rapamycin can save your life. The study that we announced last year, I just learned it's fully funded, but it's also fully enrolled. And we're going to have data reported maybe even during RAADfest as to how well rapamycin did in reducing visceral fat, improving bone density. And there's also a study at Mayo Clinic. Rapamycin, people with heart failure, people with frailty, they want to see how well rapamycin can do in humans to restore youthful functionality. And there are 2 databases that want people to register and let us know, is rapamycin doing something that's beneficial? Is it creating any side effects? So you've got this open registry, and you've got another one with very prestigious people supporting it, because a lot of people are self-experimenting with rapamycin. Before the clinical trial data comes out, we'd like to know, is it really working for you? We need to know this information. So Google searches with the name rapamycin typed in, 900% over the last year. There's also a book that came out on rapamycin, and it's pretty much a primer on what rapamycin is. If you know all about rapamycin, you don't need to read this book. But if you've never heard of rapamycin and want to learn about it, well, there's a book for sale at the Life Extension booth. I think it's around $15, and it's a good primer to learn all about rapamycin, mTOR syndrome, autophagy, all the benefits that rapamycin induces. And there'll be updates to this book coming out probably later on this year. So, plasmapheresis. where we want to circulate continually young blood into our aged bodies. It can be done with mice, but even when it's done with mice, up until now, they haven't shown reversals of immune senescence. Well, that's changing. Just going back to 1972, when you hook up the circulatory system of a young mouse to an old mouse, the old mouse grows biologically younger. One study showed human equivalent lifespan extension 10 to 12 years. Wow, a lot of benefits there. 2016, old mice treated with young human plasma grew new brain cells. Neurogenesis occurring in old mice with young human plasma. So 2022, we found out why young plasma is able to induce an age reversal effect. It turns out young blood cells spin off packages of RNA and proteins that has systemic regenerating effects, including hair growth. And for some people, that's all that matters. I try to tell them, you've got a decaying body there, but they want to grow more hair. But nonetheless, if we can take those proteins and synthesize them, which scientists do all the time, theoretically everyone in this room could be taking an injection every month or two of these proteins that induce regeneration, and that could be our pathway towards immortality. It's a major, major finding, and it was reported this year. Again, these are events, everything I'm describing occurred since last year's RAADfest. It's just an enormous amount of material. And this study on parabiosis showed some indicators of reversed immune senescence. And if we don't do something to improve our immune status, unfortunately, that's going to kill us. That along with a lot of other problems. So they were able to show youthful hematopoietic stem cell function and other indicators of improvement. And by way of example, our blood cells, as you know, are required for immunity. And in our bone marrow, we produce lots of hematopoietic stem cells, and these stem cells differentiate into immune cells. Well, older people don't have a lot of bone marrow reserve. They get sick. They have a high rate of death. And what they did with this study is they took mice who were infected with a lethal bacteria, and they were able to improve survival 50 to 60% by infusing huge amounts of hematopoietic stem cells. Well, that gave us the concept of thinking, let's do an experiment, which we're doing now, and remove as many stem cells as we can, replicate huge amounts of those, and try it out in humans. And again, the data, I'll let you know when we get the findings, but we're looking at this data thinking we might have the solution to the decline in immune function that kills us with aging. Study came out just 2 months ago, umbilical cord plasma concentrate. Some of us are having umbilical cord put directly into our body. This was a super concentrate. They wanted to measure safety and see if they could reverse aging. So they took 18 people, average age of 74, and they used something called the Grim age, which is probably the most accurate way of monitoring people's age. And other measures were done, the conventional blood tests and that sort of thing. And they gave them a lot every single week, equal to 4 umbilical cord infusions every week for 10 straight weeks. And well, they were able to reverse age by 0.78 years according to Grim age. If it doesn't sound like a lot, remember this is a very accurate test, and they only did this for 10 weeks, and they didn't do any other interventions. We believe in multi-interventions to try to circumvent aging. But kidney function improved, 30% of the biomarkers got better in these 74-year-old people, and a phenotypic age score, that's another way of measuring aging, that improved, no significant side effects. So we already know we're capable of potentially taking in huge amounts of these RNA proteins that are secreted in young blood. Umbilical cord plasma has a lot of them, and potentially reversing aging. In this slide, when you get a chance to look at this, all these slides, by the way, are up on our Age Reversal website. But DNA Grim age, that is available, by the way, here at RAADfest. The Clock Foundation has a booth, and they're making it available at a big discount price. But it lets you know what your risks of getting sick and dying are. It's a very good measure of biological age. We intend to use this test, along with many others, in the human trials we're going to be doing. So you're going to hear our Dr. Kiprov. I say our, we've helped him recruit patients for a study in which he's going to remove senile plasma proteins, replace it with healthy albumin and immunoglobulins to see if he cannot demonstrate the same age reversal effects in people as he'd seen in the animal model. We're trying to replicate the successful parabiosis studies. We want to do that because, well, if it's working in mice, let's figure out how to make it work in people. And Dr. Kiproff is working with the Buck Institute. This is another great charity to support. They're performing a lot of aging studies and producing a lot of interesting findings. So this is another group, another charity that you can write tax-deductible checks to, and it can really make a big difference. Now, what I am doing right now is, well, I want to move the technology forward faster. So we are putting together a network in Nassau, Bahamas, and we intend to work with all of the regenerative medicine clinics in Nassau who want to work with us to attempt to validate how well their stem cell and other therapies are working. And we've made a real commitment. I've leased this building. It's an impressive place, by the way. It's not where we're going to treat people, but it's where we're going to coordinate our master plan to get all these clinics on the same page, so we're doing the same blood tests on every one of their patients to validate what works, what doesn't work, how can we modulate a program to improve the way we can fight aging. By the way, there's a lot of bedrooms in this place for people who can't afford the hotels. They're welcome to stay at this facility. We rented it so that people have a place to go to converse, meet, coordinate, design, and execute effective trials. If you are interested in going offshore, and that offshore could be Nassau, Bahamas, it may be in Mexico after we validate certain clinics, just send us a note on our agereversal.net website and say, I'm interested in participating in an offshore clinical trial in Mexico, Nassau, and then we'll get in touch with you when the clinical trial initiates. And this is the big problem. Every day, people over age 64, they die. Over 6,000 every single day. We can't tolerate it anymore. And what we're doing to try to mitigate the effects of that is experiment, self-experimentation, and we still don't have a consistent answer, which is why we've set up the Nassau, Bahamas operation and others to validate what is working. But what's been standing in our way, unfortunately, for the last couple of years, because we've raised the money, we have the money to do research, is an antiquated system for assessing clinical trials. And until we stop the way the FDA can say no to a clinical study, especially using repurposed drugs like metformin, we're not going to make the progress we need. So we've got to break down this barrier. And for those who don't know, metformin was introduced in our Life Extension magazine in 1995. Wow, 1995. And if you look at the history of metformin, it was approved in England in 1957, approved by the FDA in the United States in 1994. And here we are 65 years later. Most people don't know metformin has anti-aging properties. And the FDA is treating metformin like it's a brand new compound, even though it's been studied thousands of times in many, many, many different situations. So this is the homepage of a website that I may launch this year if we don't get our way with the FDA. It's going to expose what we know is ineptitude, fraud, corruption, and I've got it pretty much built. It's just a matter of launching at the right time. So instead of us going to war with the FDA, I really would rather ask you to log onto our website, sign a petition that simply asks the FDA to let older people opt out of the rigorous control that FDA has over clinical research so people can engage using metformin, rapamycin, dasatinib, NAD infusions, whatever we think might work. And then, of course, the exosomes, the young plasma. We want that to be readily available, tested on large numbers of people, and we prefer to do it in the United States instead of having to go offshore. And for people who don't know a little bit about our history, we have taken on the FDA and many other government agencies, and we have prevailed. These are just covers of Life Extension magazine that talk about what we were doing in court, in Congress, anywhere we could find a way to expose the fraud and the corruption that goes on in the drug approval process. We know what the FDA does. We know their relationship with big pharma and how that impedes smaller groups from conducting research. So we want to mobilize our 500,000 name database. That's Life Extension's database, 500,000, and then People in this room have hundreds of thousands of people that they can mobilize. And if we get these petitions signed, and Liz Parrish is going to talk about this a lot during her presentation, we can potentially get the government out of our hair. Let us do the research we need to do quick. So I'm going to take a little water break. This was me in 1995 when the FDA was trying to ban vitamins. And I'm on a national TV show here.
I've had to stare down the barrel of a .45 caliber handgun. I've had FDA agents armed break down my doors, seize my vitamins. They don't like what I have to say. But what I said back in 1985 in our newsletter about using vitamins to slow the progression of AIDS now is acknowledged by the FDA as being true.
The FDA, we won that battle a few months after I gave that interview. The FDA did me a big favor, by the way. They raided our facilities, stole our vitamins, tried to put me in jail forever. But that got us a lot of media coverage. And when they raided us, we had about 4,000 subscribers to our newsletter. And then after 9 years of all kind of free media publicity, all the major talk shows I got on, and newspapers and magazines reporting on how evil we were, and the FDA was trying to protect consumers when that wasn't the case, nonetheless, we prevailed. We beat them in court in an unprecedented way, and we had 25,000 supporters after our victory. So the FDA did us a huge public relations favor, because people don't pay attention to you unless the government wants to put you in a jail cell. So I have edited, and in early days I wrote the whole thing, 1,500-page medical textbooks to let people know what they can do beyond conventional medicine to save their life when they have specific diseases. And I don't want you to buy these books, by the way, because everything in these books is now on our Life Extension website. And that's important because technology changes so fast that when you print something a month or two later, it could be different. So updates to all the disease prevention and treatment books on our Life Extension website if you want to read about ways to potentially help with a difficult condition that's not being addressed by conventional medicine. I've written books on FDA fraud, deception, and abuse. I've written books on pharmacracy, meaning the incestuous relationship between the FDA and Big Pharma. So I have a track record of doing work, writing, appearing on media. That's what I'm saying. Please, everyone here who wants to see clinical trials in the United States accelerate, rapidly accelerate, and higher quality, where we have better diagnostics, everything in the United States is going to be better, please sign the petition on our website. Now, Lyndon Johnson, he stopped running for political office at a relatively early age. He had coronary artery occlusion. He knew he was going to die relatively soon. He had his first heart attack in 1955, and there was nothing they could do about it in 1955. So he's dead at age 64. Nothing could be done to save him. And then you look at our current former presidents. And I updated this slide because, well, look at this, Bill Clinton and George Bush, they're both 76 years of age. But they had the benefits of coronary artery bypass surgery, they had the benefits of stents, they had the benefits of medications, and they're alive and doing well. And Dick Cheney, wow, he had everything go wrong with him. And he even wrote a book about the fact that he was on the verge of death so many times, and the only reason he's alive is advances in biomedical technology. That's why that is the single most important aspect of what we need to do, is move the technology forward. Because we're in a similar predicament right now as LBJ. He had blocked arteries, they didn't know how to unclog them. We are aging to death. We know ways to slow it down. We think we know ways to reverse it, but we need to validate that. We need to do that in carefully controlled clinical trials. And you look at what happened since 1969, when heart disease was killing a ton of people, a 68% decline over a 45-year period of time. This is remarkable. 44% decline in heart failure-related deaths. All this good news. But unfortunately, if we don't continue to follow any kind of healthy lifestyle that's needed, mortality goes up. So we have now surging numbers of people suffering heart attacks and dying because of obesity. This is something that has to be reversed, or it's going to circumvent virtually everything we're trying to do. We've had people who want to engage in our interventions trials. They want to do something to participate, but they're too heavy. They're not going to benefit from us the way they should. So combat obesity with diet and or drugs. And the drug that came out this year with an incredible study people lost 1/4 of their body weight. These are very obese people, and 40% of them lost significant amount of weight. It did generate some publicity, published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and this is a drug that I urge anyone who is obese to consider going on and perhaps losing enough weight so their obesity does not kill them. Now, the name of that drug is Mounjaro, used in that successful study with 1/4 body weight, but there's also a version of it that you can take by tablet form, Rybelsus, semaglutide. And I've had doctors for years, by the way, tell me they're prescribing semaglutide to their overweight patients and are seeing great results. And now that study came out on this new class of drugs, which is not that new, GLP-1 agonists, glucagon-like peptide-1 agonists. And if you look at the multiple mechanisms in which these drugs work, not just to reduce body fat, but improve risk factors across the board. This drug, I believe, for an obese person is an anti-aging drug. If you're not obese, by the way, do not take it. It has some side effects, but the side effects are nowhere near as bad as suffering from obesity, and I don't want to lose any more supporters because they're afraid to take a drug that could save their life. If you don't want to take a drug, well, this study came out in 2022, and just a modest amount of fasting 5 days out of the month resulted in significant weight loss, improvements in glycemic markers. So we can save people with drugs or without drugs. It depends on what they want to do. But as it relates to what is the healthiest diet you should follow, a meta-analysis of all the studies up until recently, what foods confer longevity, well, this is pretty much it as it relates to what you can do. More legumes, whole grains, and nuts, fewer red meats, fewer processed meats. Do this, and you will live a heck of a lot longer. But to get that 10 to 13 years, you have to start at age 20. And we don't have that option. But this chart does show on the upper right-hand side the triple green arrows are legumes, whole grains, and nuts. That's what's good for us. The down arrows, the red ones, the red meat, the processed meat, sweetened drinks, that's what's killing us. And the fish, fruit, and vegetables, we know those are good for us, but not as good as the other foods. And if we start at age 60, we still get 8 years of additional life. And the reason men do better than women is men typically eat unhealthy. They eat less healthy than women. So when a man switches to an optimized diet, well, he gets more lifespan extension. And even at age 80, you still get a 2 to almost 4 year life expectancy increase. And that may be all it takes for you to then enter a realm where CRISPR makes you young again. So there's a lot of incentive to eat healthy. And as it relates to legumes, I didn't quite know what they were either, by the way, so I prepared this chart. Just the green peas, lots of beans, lentils. These are the kind of foods you want to eat more of and a lot less of the red meat and processed foods. If you can do that, you have the opportunity to live a lot longer. So every talk I give, I put this slide up because I'm up against the major television networks, every media source promoting fast food, processed food, killing people. I have to remind you, these foods are toxic. They will kill you. Please reduce or avoid your intake of these foods. I don't want to lose another RAADfest member again. I'm going to be talking about that in the next few minutes. So if you want to keep your mind as you age, stop eating processed foods because people who eat a lot of these foods, their brain ages faster. And this corresponds a little bit with the Mediterranean diet, which most of you are doing. It's good news, but I want you to go a little bit further is getting to that point of an optimal diet. So we're trying to achieve immortality. One way is mind uploading. Ray Kurzweil can talk about that this weekend, I believe, and the idea is to merge our brain with the cloud. Limitless self-improvement cycles will make us immortal, and a lot of people thought maybe it's not happening fast enough. This year, major event, the logic gates of computers improved 1 million times, which will help with computer processing, and we need that kind of computer processing to enable immortality to occur in us. Nature talking about another barrier broken, something that no one thought could happen. It happened in 2022. That's what I said. There's been more advances over the last 12 months than any other 12-month period I'm aware of. Elon Musk has a company seeking to raise money, which is done, $363 million, and he's a person who does the impossible quite a bit. And then Elon Musk said in April 2022 that if you choose to, at some point soon, you will be able to live forever. And if it was just a regular person saying this, big deal. But Elon Musk, again, has done the impossible over and over again. So the brain implant, that is a very simple one, was reported on CBS News right at the end of August. I'm going to play just a very brief video clip of how this works. And it gives you an idea of how we will be able to merge our brains with the cloud in a way that could provide the immortality we're seeking. And Dr. Nuno Martins, by the way, will talk about that this weekend at RAADfest.
We've figured out how to deliver the sensors into the brain without open brain surgery.
Inserted through the jugular vein, the device is implanted in the area of the brain that controls movement. Signals captured by a receiver in the chest are sent wirelessly to a device that decodes thoughts into commands for a digital device.
This gave me a reason to keep on living.
That was an ALS patient, by the way, and that brain implant lets him literally go to the web, surf the web, interact with his own computer. So the technology is exponentially growing. It's going to be a reality at some point, and we want to avail ourselves to it. But this individual won't. The number of people over the last 12 months, the billionaires, a record number of them. Record number of very famous people with famous companies are no longer alive. They had multi-billions of dollars. Most of them did not spend it on aging research, and they wound up dying, for the most part, of an age-related ailment. Virtually everything that kills us has a lot to do with aging, and it's regrettable that we can't convey enough information to people to say, okay, I'm going to support every charity out there that's doing aging research because they may save my life. And this individual, Kohler, I mean, that's on the toilet in my room, big Kohler name, but Mr. Kohler, he's dead. He's no longer around. His $8.8 billion, I guess it goes somewhere else. This individual, worth about $5.8 billion. Now, he dies of a heart attack at age 62. And I don't want people dying that way if we can help it. So I want people to consider, beyond lipid lowering, your glycemic markers. This is what we feel is an optimal range for glucose, insulin, A1C. It's at least an optimal range to target. And if you do that, you might reduce your risk of the most common disorders affecting aging people. So at Rad City, there's a double booth that LabCorp has, and you can get a CBC, C-reactive protein test, and it provides a surrogate measure of your biological age. And this is an incredible finding that was done. Stephen Morgan Levine and Steve Horvath, these are leading aging researchers. They developed this phenotypic age model. And if you have your blood drawn here at Rad City, there's no cost for your results here, but they were able to ascertain this by looking at 23 years of mortality follow-up on over 9,000 people, and have identified factors in blood that can predict your risk of a disease or your risk of death. So phenotypic age, also described as physiological, functional, or biological age. This is now able to be done very inexpensively. This is a recent blood test result for me showing my results indicate I'm about 11 years biologically younger than what my chronological age is. That's good, but it's sure not good enough. And again, these tests are available when you have your blood drawn at the LabCorp booth. Within a day or two, you'll get your biological age. So the cost of this, by the way, at a commercial lab, $572. As usual, we make it available at a fraction of the price. Price is $77 at the Life Extension booth. And if you're going to take advantage of that deal, and it gives you a lot of information, by the way, including A1C and insulin. If you're going to do that, don't come in fasting. Don't have breakfast and come in and have your blood drawn. So that the booth opens tomorrow morning, and it'll be open Saturday morning. So that's plenty of time for those who want to have this test and identify their phenotypic age, biological age. You got the opportunity to do that. Again, we want to target fasting glucose around 80 to 86 milligrams per deciliter, A1C 5 to 5.4, fasting insulin below 5 if we can get it. Target those areas to avoid winding up like this individual. Vincent Stona, I believe, attended almost every RAADfest. He attended all of our South Florida events. He was a volunteer, he was passionate, and he died. And I'm afraid that death was needless. Needless. He had type 2 diabetes. He was unable to control his sugar, and his doctors did not know about this class of drug. This is a class of drug that's been around since 2013. His doctors didn't know about it. And what it does is, by the way, it enables you to filter out more glucose and sodium through your kidneys than you normally would. And by urinating out the excess glucose especially, you then reduce your fasting glucose, reduce your insulin, all kinds of benefits to taking this class of drug. Now, this is only for people who have glycemic control issues, but I'm showing you some of the benefits of persistently, well, here's the detriments here. Persistently elevated glucose, it kills us. And we know it clogs our arteries. This is validated data. No one can dispute it. You have excess sugar, well, you're going to have vascular disease, cardiovascular disorders, dangers of high glucose, well known. SGLT2 inhibitors reduce your glucose and do more to delay aging. They benefit the kidneys. And the media now is talking about, when I say media, the published studies in New England Journal of Medicine are talking about using this class of drug to treat kidney failure, heart failure, and other disorders. People who take these drugs are less likely to progress to dialysis and other problems frequently associated with type 2 diabetes. This again is another slide showing how SGLT2 inhibitors can save your life if you're undergoing a problem with chronic kidney disease and kidney stones. Who wants those? Well, 50% reduced risk of kidney stones if you happen to take this class of drug. It benefits the heart. It benefits the system in a way that the New England Journal of Medicine came out with an editorial saying, if you're a practicing doctor, you should be prescribing this to people with heart failure, kidney disease, diabetes. It has multiple mechanisms. And again, this is not for everybody, but for people who have problems with glycemic control, it's something to take. As you look at the benefits, at 56% reduced all-cause mortality. Had Vincent been on this class of drug, he couldn't get a doctor who even knew about it. It just shows you how busy doctors are. I have to emphasize patient empowerment because it benefits in people with hyperglycemia, the brain, the heart, the kidneys. It benefits your ability to stay alive. 65% reduction in cancer risk in people taking these drugs. And if you happen to have cancer, yeah, you want to have this drug. You want to lower glucose and insulin because those elements will unfortunately create more tumor proliferation. So again, a slide for you to look at your convenience, the horrible effects of hyperglycemia. If you're suffering from that, it's not being controlled, SGLT2 inhibitor. Side effects, yeah, there's some of those side effects. I don't want to say they're not significant, but I look here at the risk versus reward benefit. Risks are there on the left. Urinary tract infections, which I believe could be mitigated with cranberry extracts, and some other issues that might occur, versus the benefits, the blue. It's like every disease out there. If you take this class of drug, your risk of dementia, heart disease, kidney failure, all these risks go down. So for me, I've been taking this drug for the last 6 months. My fasting glucose was around 100. I needed to do something about that, and this drug put my insulin and glucose A1C, it perfected it. So this is something for either diabetics or people who are having glucose control issues. It works in diabetics and non-diabetics. That's very important. And again, this is what we're targeting. This is where you should be to not wind up with a heart attack like that dead billionaire at age 62. So a tribute to somebody who would have been here with us, would have been at this event, but unfortunately he did not gain access to this drug. And what I want to encourage everyone is patient empowerment. Learn about your condition, find a solution, and then find a doctor who will prescribe that for you. Because we're trying to live forever. That's our objectives here. And we're not going to live forever if we don't address the problems that are occurring. So in 2022, they reversed aging in middle-aged mice in a major way. Live mice, aging going in reverse. More people living to age 100 than ever before. And we've got the $3 billion commitment. The other speakers talked about it, and they should. Huge amounts of money being poured into aging research. Could be a year or two from now, there's a major breakthrough, or maybe it'll be 5 years, but whenever it is, you want to be alive to take advantage of it. This is a charity I set up about 2 years ago. We raised over $1 million, and every cent is in the bank. We spent nothing. I am funding all of the overhead costs, including about 6 or 7 employees, people who are working on this project. I am funding all that because I made a commitment. If you write a check to this charity, the money only goes for the research costs, the diagnostics, the medications, the medical doctors have to oversee it. So if you do support charities, I talked about Better Humans, Salk Institute. This is another charity to consider supporting. Every excess dollar we get lets us do more research, lets us do better research. So time and perspective. More progress has occurred since 1900 than the prior 8,000 years put together. Wow. I mean, where are we going to be in 40 years? And this is, I think, my final slide, but it deals with the latest breakthrough. Microscopic robots put into the bodies of mice infected with a lethal bacteria. Now, 100% of the mice not getting these microscopic robots, they're dead. But 100% of the ones getting the microscopic robots that killed the bacteria, they're all alive. Wow. I mean, pneumonia still kills lots of people. And here was a technology that people used to think was science fiction. It's occurring right before our eyes. The Fantastic Voyage movie, most of you remember, it's happening right before our eyes. So again, for people who want to get a blood test with a lot of other add-ons to it for $77, let me just quickly say, you can never do enough blood testing. Ideally, you would have an implant that would be looking at your blood 24 hours a day and having an AI tell you what you're doing wrong, what you need to do to correct a problem. We can't do that. The best thing we can do at this stage is as many blood tests as we want, whatever test you need from LabCorp, they're right there in Rad City. And this particular offer, which is extended to everyone here, $77 for a lot of blood tests. And we let you know what your biological age is, no extra cost. Quick turnaround. So that concludes my talk, and I see there's 57 seconds left here, and it's amazing. It took a lot of work. I had, by the way, over 500 slides. I had to move them down to 200, and that's how much great information there is out there. So.
That was impressive, wasn't it?
So kind.
Yeah, you should take a sip of water. That was really impressive. You actually delivered those slides with like a good rhythm, and you covered a lot of ground. It's a little bit like when you see a really good horn player or saxophone, you're like wondering, like, when do they breathe? So that was good. So we have time for some questions. Are we going to get those questions up here? And I'm sure there's more questions that we can't answer, but hopefully Bill will also be around. Let's see, best way to keep up with everything that is happening in longevity.
Well, you already belong here to the RAADfest group. They send out emails, our Life Extension Magazine, our Age Reversal Network. And there's a number of groups, by the way, that we can refer you to that are self-experimenting. So there's a lot out there you can keep up with, getting emails whenever a major breakthrough occurs. And
Sure. Okay, how can you tell if fasting is working for you? And do you have tips on how to start?
Well, one way is to get a baseline blood test and then engage in the intermittent fasting, and then 3 months later, 2 months later even, get another one, get another blood test. We've seen people improve within 10 days, literally, where they come in with markers that you wonder why they're still alive. 10 days after an aggressive fast, they improve dramatically. So you have a lot of control over it. A blood test baseline, blood test after, that's a good way to tell. And blood pressure.
Are the rapalogs better than rapamycin?
Well, we don't know that yet. But we are studying the form of rapamycin that unfortunately is a lot of money. In other countries it's not. And we're referring people to sources outside the United States to buy it. Therefore they can afford it. But I don't have any data on whether the rapalogs at this point are better than the rapamycin itself.
Yeah, Dr. Robert Lufkin's going to give some really interesting data on rapamycin during this event as well. Let's see. Best therapy to start sort of in every decade, in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s?
Yeah, I mean, as it relates to senolysis, the senescent cell burden, I think around the age of 35 or 40, you should get on some sort of a senolytic program. Now, intermittent fasting will help remove senescent cells if you do it enough. So there's a lot to do, but yes, there are certain ways that younger people can prevent problems from occurring in the future, and really I'm going to be redundant with this blood test. A 30-year-old get a blood test, anything that's out of balance, correct it. A lot easier to avoid a problem than have a heart attack occur at 55 or something.
Sure. Can you talk about side effects of rapamycin?
Well, they talk about maybe some increased risks of mouth sores, but we're not seeing that in the people who are taking it once a week. Bear in mind, the typical person is taking 1 milligram or 2 of rapamycin every day. Well, that's toxic. But if you take 5 to 10 milligrams once a week, you get the benefits, and then 48 hours later, the rapamycin's gone. It's out of your system. So I don't believe, at this point, I'm not aware of side effects of people taking rapamycin once a week as opposed to them taking it every day. Those are organ transplant patients who need it to prevent organ rejection.
So with proper dosage, no, like the person was asking about diabetes specifically, no association with diabetes?
Rapamycin, don't know that yet. It helps reduce visceral fat, we believe. A typical dose of rapamycin is 5 to 10 milligrams once a week. That's all you need to do. You don't need to take it every day. You don't want to take it every day. It's weekly dosing.
The question about that obesity drug, how can I get it? Do doctors know about it?
Yeah, the doctor should. And you really have to almost call around and say, does your doctor prescribe the sodium glucose transport 2 inhibitors is one of them. That's an anti-diabetic drug. The glucagon-like peptide agonist, you really should call and say, I want to get on that drug that enabled 1/4 of these obese people's body mass to disappear. And Mounjaro was the name, but some doctors will prescribe the tablet semaglutide. And I did this, by the way, when Viagra came out. I phoned local doctors and said, I'm going to come in here for one reason. I want Viagra. And I finally found a doctor who says, come on in, we'll just write you a script for a certain amount of money. So if you call endocrinologists, these drugs are approved by the FDA. It's just not all the endocrinologists are keeping up to date with them. So don't be shy. You just call around and ask, I'm only coming in there because I want access to this drug. And you'll be surprised. Some people will say, oh yeah, we prescribe that all the time. Or the doctor's not familiar with it. So it saves you time and money by calling ahead of time.
So this is a good question about new therapies. When something's new, how do you decide when it's safe to take it?
Well, the SGLT2, sodium glucose co-transporters inhibitors, those have been around since 2013. They were tested way before that in clinical studies. We know what the side effects are. We know what the benefits are. The glucagon-like peptide 1 agonists, those have been around for a number of years. And it's just that massive study, CNN and other media people reported huge weight loss. We're talking about obese people who need to lose weight. And I've lost a lot of people over the last couple of years thinking they could experiment with some of these interventions and still maintain an obese body mass. It doesn't work that way. You need to combat your obesity if you're going to enjoy the kind of benefits we're seeking.
And then in general, what's sort of your, what's your process for validating something new? How do you decide, like, when something new, how do you decide when you should take it?
Well, first of all, we evaluate the peer-reviewed published medical literature, see what's going on, and usually there's hundreds of studies to evaluate. And then we reach out to our Age Reversal Network, and we get incredible feedback on a website, within the website, so to speak, on a forum, where people report what kind of benefits they're getting and what they aren't. So when we have a protocol to recommend, it's usually based on a lot of good anecdotal feedback. And people like Dr. Alan Green, he's treated over 700 patients with rapamycin, many of them now with dasatinib. So we've got clinical experience with these experimental therapies. And the good news is good data being reported.
It's good to have a network, right, to turn to. And it's really inefficient to try to do it all on your own in terms of validating. Do you think we should track blood sugar even if we aren't diabetic?
Well, yeah. I'll tell you, the reason I went on the SGLT2 inhibiting drug is my fasting glucose was averaging almost 100 milligrams per deciliter. And here I am intermittently fasting, taking metformin, taking a ton of supplements, calorie restricting, and at age 67, soon to be 68, my sugar was too high. My insulin was too high. I got on the Jardiance drug. That's one of the many SGLT2 inhibitors, and all of my glycemic markers normalized. The glucose, the insulin, A1C all went back to a perfect youthful range, taking a drug that diabetics take. So if you're out of that range of like 80 to 86 milligrams per deciliter of glucose, if your fasting insulin A1C is higher than what you want, ask your doctor to prescribe one of these SGLT2 inhibiting drugs. And if they refuse to, well, there's offshore sources. There's all kind of ways to get your hands on it. I've got boxes of it piled up in my condominium right now because I never want to run out. It did so many good things for me. I don't want to risk running out of that medication.
Do you want to give people an update on the VIA study and what results have come from that?
Well, the update is the FDA refused to approve it. And as a result, we got $1 million sitting in the bank, not being spent, and we do plan to institute portions of that study in new clinical projects that we are funding right now. We now have many more interventions to add to it, so one benefit of the FDA saying no, and we're trying to reverse that course by getting the FDA to not deny us clinical trial opportunities for what are nothing but repurposed medications. But the VIA study has been put on hold. We do intend to launch other studies that will include even more interventions, because we have more data now on umbilical cord plasma concentrates, on all kind of exosome therapies. So we'll be adding a lot more to the original concept of that VIA study.
Okay, that's good to hear. Which natural products show the most potential for longevity?
Could be lithium. It could be some very low-cost items like curcumin, just a low-cost supplement with multimodal benefits. There's a lot out there, and the data is so consistent with it that we can confidently say, you take fish oil, take curcumin, you're probably going to live longer. People with a high omega-3 index in their blood, they live about 5 years longer on average than a person with a low omega-3 index. So there's good data on the supplements, but it's not good enough for me. I'm advancing way beyond supplements. I've been involved with supplements for 40 years, but we're now moving into repurposed prescription drugs. And we've actually been involved with those for the last 40 years also. Problem is getting people to access those drugs.
Great. We're running out of time, but I think it'd be good to remind people of where they can get those slides, just in case they didn't photographically memorize all of it in real time. I know. age-reversal.net. And what I'm hoping to do, by the way, is, if we're able to, is just send an email out to everyone in this room with a direct link to those slides. Because I really, if you like that, because I want you to study them. I had to go through them very quickly, but I want you to study them, take all the time you want, look at the references, read the data that substantiates everything I talked about. Everything I talk about has a lot of scientific substantiation, and if you read the reference, go onto your computer, you'll be more amazed than what I present here. The data is actually stronger than what I write up about. Okay, I'm sure there's more questions, but that's our time for now. So, Bill Faloon, thank you so much.
Great job. Great being here. Great being here.